I mean, look, I can't say it strongly enough. There is nothing weak about femininity. There is nothing weak about femininity. Look at a woman whose family is threatened and tell me that she is weak. Look at a woman who has a sense that something's wrong and then goes out and fights for social change. I mean, the one that comes to mind really quickly is Erin Brockovich. Everyone told her, don't look here, everything's fine here. And what did she do? She changed the fate of an entire town. Mm-hmm. Like, this is the power of the feminine. The feminine are the inquisitors. We are the disruptors.
Welcome to the Spiritual Forum, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I just want to say thank you to everybody who tunes in. I'm making some milestones on my YouTube channel. Appreciate everybody who's subscribed and everybody who leaves a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and also who donate to this podcast. It really helps this message of hope, inspiration, and awakening to get out into the world. And before I introduce my guest, I have to obviously point out that I have a new background. And I'm very interested in your feedback on this background. And, is it fun or is it like too cosmic? I found this when I was on vacation recently, and I thought it's supposed to be a tree of life, and I thought this would be fun for my podcast. And we're going to have a fun conversation today, so I thought it'd be appropriate to introducing it today. So let me introduce you to my guest. Her name is Alanna Kaivalya, and she's an author, educator, speaker, and pleasure seeker. After spending more than 20 years studying psychology, the human condition, the nature of the feminine and femininity, Eastern spirituality, and earning a doctoral degree in mythological studies and depth psychology, she set her sights on empowering women through a better understanding of femininity. She believes her greatest legacy is helping women define femininity in the modern age and giving them clear pathways to becoming fully satisfied women. She's written 5 books, the most recent being The Way of the Satisfied Woman, Reclaiming Feminine Power. And I understand you also have a podcast of that same name. Welcome, Alanna.
It's a pleasure to be here, Carol. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I'm really excited about this topic and really excited about talking about femininity and the feminine and kind of redefining that and how we can really become satisfied and not feel like we're having to compete with men or become men. And I know that's what we're going to be talking about today. I've got lots of experience in that as well. But before we get into your general thesis, let's do a couple rapid fire questions. And it'll just be fun to play. Just in a nutshell, we'll expand on this in the podcast, but in a nutshell, what is your overall message?
To encourage women to pursue satisfaction, which is defined as the pleasure derived from the fulfillment of your wishes and needs.
Very powerful, very exciting. Can't wait to dig into that. Okay. Is there a person in history, if you could go back in time, who would be a person that you would want to have coffee or tea with?
My grandmother. I would give anything to have another chai with my baba.
Okay, I love that. You mentioned her in your book, and I think that must be very, very special for you.
I actually dedicate the book to her.
Yeah, and I can see you have emotion around it. Yeah. Okay, and do you have any words or phrase that you generally live by?
Wow, and to pick just one.
Well, you can pick.
It's funny. One of the books I wrote is actually on mantras, and so I have a lot of phrases. Let me think of maybe for today and for this podcast, it is always get your needs met.
Okay, great. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for playing.
Yeah.
All right. So
absolutely. That was fun. I felt like I was on a game show.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong answer, though. I mean, I can't say you're wrong.
Okay. Still winning.
Yes, still winning. Very satisfied.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So, Alanna, can you give us a little bit of background on how you came around to this being your message, and your background's so interesting. This, studying the human condition and psychology. I've done that my whole life as well. But you've kind of come down to this thesis about the satisfied woman. And so, can you just generally tell us how you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started my career essentially in the field of yoga and spirituality. And along with that came a lot of study of the masculine and feminine. It's really inbuilt into Eastern mysticism. And then that coupled with my doctoral studies in psychology, which is also really based in masculinity and femininity. So there was something about this particular topic that drew me in and intrigued me for the last, I guess now it's 25 years. And I've been teaching about it for that long. And kind of alongside of that, I've been raised in this patriarchal culture. I bought into the narrative that success and the pursuit of success at all costs is really what makes life meaningful, and that as women, we have to do it all for everybody and ourselves at all times, and even do it better than everyone else. And so I got into the mindset, which I think a lot of women do, is to man up and armor myself for the world and prove to everyone else that I could do it. And by all external accounts, I definitely achieved success. I had created a multi seven figure business on my own, from my own intellectual property, developing online courses, writing books, doing international yoga teacher training programs, and astrology and tarot and the whole thing. And I was married to a guy who on paper looked great. And then I realized how incredibly unhappy and dissatisfied I was. That this thing that the world said I needed to do actually wasn't for my benefit. All of the rules of the game are written on masculine terms, and they don't really serve the feminine. So, as I was really pivoting and digging in more to this concept as a way to understand why I was so dissatisfied with a life that, for all, from everybody on the outside looked great, I came to understand more powerfully how the feminine is shortchanged in this world. This world was really not built for us, and how desperately women need this work in order to reclaim their femininity and create lives of satisfaction. So I went all in, Carol. I sold my business. I got out of that relationship. I moved from one coast to the other, and I have dedicated my life to this particular calling. And it could not be more timely. I didn't see when I started this that my book would be released in November of 2024, which by anybody's accounting is a pretty pivotal time in the history of certainly of this country for women. And I'm really excited to be here with this work.
I'm so excited to talk about this because I was a chemical engineer in an oil refinery in the 1980s.
Okay. So you wore shoulder pads.
Yes, I wore shoulder pads, and
Yes.
I worked in a refinery in a plant. So for the most part, I wore more casual clothes and coveralls and whatnot. But there were times when you dressed up, and yeah, it was shoulder pads, and I did wear.
Hmm.
I will have to say my suits were pink and red. I didn't fit in at all.
At least that. At least that.
I know. And I was thinking, I've been reflecting after reading through your book and thinking about our conversation today. I've been reflecting on, was I really trying to do the whole man thing, or did I kind of do the feminine wild thing? And I thought that I had done a lot of I'm just going to be successful, but I really didn't. I think back and I'm like, wow, I kind of did it on my own terms. I'm pretty proud of
Good.
myself that
Good.
I never, like the men, I never had any goals. I never I never really tried to climb the ladder, and I did fully express myself, and I looked like a complete crazy person in that environment, but I'm very satisfied with my own
Good.
personal performance.
I'm really glad to hear that, honestly. That's a unique story. When I talk to women about this and their experience in the corporate world, they often recognize, as soon as I say it, that structure and those expectations were not developed or built with women in mind. And I mean, I think even you, as a wild woman who made her own way in the field, could probably guess what most women are called when they enter a boardroom or a meeting space with big ideas,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
right?
Yes, right,
And
right.
simply by nature of the fact that we're women and we're trying to manhandle those experiences because those are the rules of the game. But, those aren't our rules. And there's nothing worse than building a ladder and climbing to the top of the wall and realizing you're on the wrong wall. So, I'm trying to shift things and really get people, women especially, to understand that our needs are just different. They're not better or worse. This isn't a hierarchical experience, even though the patriarchy sets masculine values higher than feminine values. We ourselves need to recalibrate that value system and understand that women can absolutely be chemical engineers, and they're going to do it in their own way.
Yeah, yes,
They're going to do
yes.
it on their own rules.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking back now and I'm thinking, near the end of my career, I was only there for 20 years, but I had a responsibility over lots of different operating units and people who are like operators, pipe fitters,
Yeah.
just all of that. And being the female, boss, I did have to kind of put the armor on to go into work every
Yep.
day and kind of like
Yep.
it's kind of like manning up to be able to all that pushback coming
Exactly.
this way. But what was so
Hmm.
interesting is I would be out in the refinery for like hours and I would come up to the office and my boss would be like, "Where have you been?" Where have you been? And it's like, well, people just, they would always come up and just talk to me. And I'd end up being in a conference room hearing about all their problems.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
so funny. And my boss
That
is like,
sounds
"You're
about
not their
right.
counselor." It's like, well, it's kind of what I do also.
Well, we as women are always the emotional regulators of any relationships and spaces that we're in, so I'm not surprised.
It's just funny looking back. It's funny looking back. But there is this pressure, I think, to be successful. You've got to kind of be like a man. Like that's how we have to be. And lucky us, women have been liberated now. We can become like men, and that's gotten so distorted. And I,
Hmm.
I still think that pressure is out there. So your message is something different. You're trying to change this paradigm, this idea
Yes.
of being shifting from being successful or wanting to be successful to being satisfied, which I'm guessing men would probably like to be satisfied too if they were honest with themselves. um, so how do we make this shift?
Well, a lot of it is to do with mindset and some self inquiry and dismantling the things that we were raised with and thought we knew and believe even to be true about how to create a meaningful and well lived life. We have to remember that all of us were raised in this patriarchal culture. There's no other way to name it. It is patriarchal.
Yeah.
It has been that way for millennia. We don't know. We can't, like, the end or the beginning date is a little fuzzy. It might have been the last 3,000 years, even perhaps as long as 8,000 years. So the patriarchy has had a lot of time to perfect itself and advance its own agenda and its own narratives. And what I want to say too is that even though the patriarchy is skewed towards masculine values and centering masculinity and men in particular, it doesn't actually do service to masculinity or men either. It's very distorted with
Hmm.
those masculine values because both masculinity and femininity are awesome and fabulous. Again, there's no hierarchy when we consider them in their purest and most elevated forms. They're meant to work together in a symbiosis. I think about that beautiful yin-yang symbol of Eastern mysticism, where one half of that paisley shape inside the circle is dark with a little white spot, and the other half is white with a little dark spot. So there's a little of each in both, and each have their own unique shape, but on their own, they can't roll down the hill. They have to be together and operating in their own capacity and in their own space in order to roll on down the wheel of life. So the first kind of big shift is that just because we're in the patriarchy and it's distorted masculine doesn't demonize the masculine. And femininity needs to be just as valued as masculinity. Its needs, desires, and wants and values are just different. And I want women to start owning that for themselves. So one of the things that the patriarchy and masculinity centers and teaches us is this idea of success. And there's nothing wrong with success, but it is a very masculine idea that we're going toward a goal, a linear pathway, very directed, climbing a ladder. It can be very hierarchical when it's, in a distorted fashion. at all costs, to the detriment of others, and often very solitary. We really prize that DIY, did it themselves, made their own way, pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, didn't get any help kind of mentality, which is very isolating. That's definitely not feminine. The feminine, instead, can get meaning and the most out of life through satisfaction, which I define in the beginning as the pleasure derived from the fulfillment of wishes and needs, because femininity wants things to be holistic. For the feminine, we want to operate in connection and collaboration, not in detriment to everyone else who's around us. We don't want to, it's not at all costs. We're not marching up a ladder. We want to include everyone in our success. It's ever evolving. So fulfillment isn't like a goal or a deadline or a key performance indicator or lines on a graph. Fulfillment is a feeling. And one of the two biggest superpowers of femininity is our emotional depth, so our ability to feel and connect with our feelings, and our intuition. And when we center those and value those as highly as the masculine centers and values its superpowers, which are logic and reason, that's when we have that perfect yin yang and that balance. So satisfaction is going to get the same kind of gratification out of life on on feminine woman's terms as success would for a masculine man.
Yeah, it makes so much sense, and I do agree. I do think that the whole patriarchal structure also has men trapped, and I
Yeah.
really I
Yes.
really do see that men are also
Yes.
trapped in this
Yes.
paradigm, and that, they want out but probably don't know how to get out either.
Absolutely. The way I like to describe it, first of all, nobody's to blame. We're all here. We're all doing our best. No one pulled us aside as children and said, okay, this is how the main energies of the psyche work. This is the optimal, display of femininity. This is the optimal display of masculinity. I just call it improper training. So I want to give us all some grace, right? Even women have not had great training or models for what femininity can look like. We've been told that feminine values are less valuable, are scary, are dangerous. We've been taught to ignore and suppress our emotions because otherwise we're crazy. Think
Mhm,
that through.
mhm.
You're not being logical. You're not being rational. We've been taught to ignore our intuition. That doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you want to do this? We've been taught to excuse the bad behavior of our masculine counterparts because we're only valuable if we're smiling and likable. So there's a lot of things about being a woman in a patriarchy with its complex distortions that can make even the best, most accomplished feminine woman a little scared
Mhm,
of
mhm.
bringing forth her femininity. So I want to start to neutralize that and really empower them.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it is interesting. The whole intuition thing is something that I think I've had many guests on about our intuition, and I
Yeah.
think that generally people think that some people have that gift and most of us don't. And it's certainly something that we don't learn to trust. And
Wow.
yeah, wouldn't that be interesting if as children we really were encouraged to really
Yeah.
identify that, listen to that voice, trust
Yeah.
that, and then be not necessarily rewarded, but at least acknowledged.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm hoping, one of the things that I really point out in my book is that, look, we live in a patriarchy. This world wasn't built for us, but there are ways through it. And the first place we start is with us and our own nuclear existence. So our nuclear families, our partners, our children, our colleagues, our communities. If we can revalue femininity and show the people around us how important, how strong, how capable that femininity is, then we start to set the stage for greater change. And of course, we want to influence the children to embody and embrace these energies to the best of their ability. And the loss of intuition is honestly catastrophic. There will be no circumstance in which someone ignores their intuition and is better off for it.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I do think I do think that somewhere along the line a while ago with the women's movement, I feel like we were taught to get on the man's track and
Yes.
and become more of a man, and you can have it all. You
Yes.
can have it all. And I remember trying to have it all. I had a family and I had a career, and but then I realized, I really I really valued my family more than my career. And
Yeah.
I remember I was invited once. I used to do speeches at Society of Women Engineers at different campuses, and I went to Ohio State once, and I did a very, very authentic speech. And it kind of went like this: ladies, you really can't necessarily have it all.
Yeah.
You're going to have to make some choices, and no
Hmm.
choice is better than the other choice, but it's kind of a myth that you can have it all. And they couldn't have run me out of that room faster than they did.
It's a complicated thing to pitch because there's so much pride,
Yeah.
especially in our American culture, of this
Yes.
idea of having it all. And especially for women, look, one of the benefits of living today is that we have more power, agency, and choices than we've ever had. I mean, do you realize that it wasn't until I think 1988 that a woman could even have her own checking account without a male cosigner? We weren't even
1988?
allowed to, yes, we weren't even
Wow.
allowed to work with our own money in the last, what is that, 3 decades? So we have more choices, agency, power now than we ever have. And yeah, part of that narrative, part of that bill of goods we've been sold is that as women, yeah, we can do it all and we should do it all. But what I want us to start asking is, do we want to?
Yes. Yeah.
Of course we can. Like, of
Yeah,
course we
right.
can. But do we want to? Because the
Is that
cost,
satisfying?
it's ultimately, I don't know that it is for all women. And what it actually creates is women who, again, we're reinforcing the narrative of the patriarchy that as women, our greatest value lies in how much we give ourselves away. So it's pretty entrained into most women that we have to give and give and give and give of ourselves, that we are the nurturers, that we are the providers, that we give our expertise, we give more time at work. If we're asked to stay late, the answer is of course. If we're asked to put more time in on a job, of course. Then we have to go home and we have to give 100% to our family and 100% into our relationship and then into our community as well. And that consistent depletion, and I would even use the word ravaging, of the feminine is actually not feminine. And what it does is it diminishes our capacity for resilience. It puts us on our back foot. It disempowers us. It creates burnout,
Mhm,
exhaustion,
mhm.
fatigue. It creates a lot of resentment in relationships. And that's not feminine. Okay, so let me blow your mind real quick, and for all listeners too. One of the primary qualities of the feminine is receptivity, not giving away, but taking in, receiving. Our role as the feminine is not to overdo, overachieve, overstrive, overbook ourselves, overwork ourselves. Our role is to actually sit back, relax, be in a creative place of inspiration for those around us, and receive the generosity of our masculine counterparts. Now, that doesn't mean that we're sitting around eating bonbons all day, right? I'm not asking women to check out of life and the workforce and family completely. But what it does is it allows us to preserve, because we're the harbingers of life force. So it allows us to preserve and direct that life force energy in the most fulfilling ways for us. And we reserve it, and we're very calculated with who and how we disperse that energy. And we have the resources to do it because our well never runs dry if we're in a receptive state.
And that's so interesting because people do confuse the woman or the femininity as being a giver, 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 giver. And you kind of put that on its side a little bit and say the
Yep,
masculine is
it is.
the generous giver.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Yes, the masculinity, true healthy masculinity. If you think about it, I mean, it makes sense. Just like a little bit of, let's apply some masculine logic here. The masculine, some of the foremost qualities of the masculine are providership and protection. right? And we love our masculine counterparts for that. Now, I'm not living in the 1950s. Providership doesn't mean that he has to go out and make all the money and bring home the bacon. And protection doesn't mean he has to be a big, buff, strong guy and get in a street fight every time someone catcalls you, right? There's a lot of ways to protect. There's a lot of ways to provide, but the healthy masculine actually feels energized by that. Healthy masculinity actually also is incredibly energized. Like, they love to lead. They're the leaders. They are, they like to be the guides. They like to be the decision makers. They lead the charge. They're very capable, and they're nurturing. Masculinity is nurturing, and nurturing is a word that describes the growth and development of whatever it is you're nurturing. That is inherently masculine, not feminine. Feminine is nourishing. Feminine takes in the nourishment of the world, right? So it's a very different kind of energy. And again, the femininity that we've been trained to kind of, I guess, live with in this patriarchy is it's taking advantage of what we have to offer. And it's tricking us a little bit that offering is necessary and required for our value. And if we're not offering, we're easily discarded and abandoned.
We really got it backwards. And
Yeah.
I think about the times where I coach women to look at the birds of paradise. I don't know if you've ever seen the mating dances of the birds of paradise. It's so interesting. And the female is like sitting on this branch, and the males they're coming up and they're just doing their
So
dancing.
impressive.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
like trying to impress her and get her attention. And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
and and then another one will come up, and it's like we have this so backwards when it comes to dating,
Yes.
where we have it completely backwards, where it's the
Oh,
woman doing the bird of paradise thing, and the man just
yeah.
sitting back and going, it's like, no, ladies, we've got it backwards. We hold all the power.
Absolutely. This is one of the things I work with most with individual women in coaching, and I coach them through this experience because, as human beings, we're hardwired for a relationship. At some point in our lives, we all want a relationship. And I'm not saying that we need a man, but at some point in our lives, it's very likely that we're going to want to embark on a relationship. And if we're doing it with that masculine armor on, with that belief that our job is to provide everything, that we have to overachieve, if we're wearing the masculine armor going out trying to find a masculine man, that's not gonna work. We have to be in our feminine. We have to be in that receptive mode. The feminine doesn't chase. The feminine doesn't chase. The feminine receives. The feminine attracts. The
Yes.
feminine brings in and inspires that bringing in by nature of her life energy, of her creativity. I mean, we're the masculine is generous, as in giving. The feminine is generative. When we receive, we are able to create things from almost nothing, right? That's where our real money and abundance flow comes in, is through that generativity. We're incredibly creative, and that creativity is inspiring to others around us. They want to support it. They want to participate in it. It creates bonds and relationship. It's really beautiful. But again, that doesn't happen, and we can't relax into our feminine unless we have that brilliant masculine counterpart there to support us, and we won't attract him if we're in our masculine ourselves. So it's a bit of a negative cycle and a catch-22.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so let's pivot then to your 4 keys, because I think that's a
Okay.
good time to start talking about that.
Awesome. Yeah. So the book's central premise is satisfaction, really getting women to drop the idea of success. I mean, look, success here and there is fine. And if you're hot in the pursuit of it, all the best. And all humans have both masculine and feminine energy. And there might be times where, putting your masculine forward and going for success is what you want. No problem. However, in a general rule, and what I just want you to consider it. Satisfaction is going to bring you so much more meaning and fulfillment in your life. Again, because it's got more of that holistic, expansive energy to it. It's ever evolving. You never really reach an end point. It includes others. But in the pursuit of satisfaction, we as feminine women, we have to have these 4 keys in place for satisfaction even to be possible. So they're critical. They're critical foundations to a woman's satisfaction. And I want to point out for all your listeners that wonderful old saying that my mother used to love, which is, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Okay? And research is actually proving this. And by mama, I mean any feminine woman in any circumstance. That we are the emotional regulators of our places, spaces, and relationships. If we're in distress, if we're unhappy, if we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling depressed, so is everyone else around us. Right? The statistics show that the happier the mother, the more emotionally regulated and resilient the children. It depends on the mother's happiness, period. Okay, so it cannot benefit the world more to ensure that women have a sense of satisfaction. And to have that, we have to have these 4 things in place. Number 1, safety. And by safety, I mean to be exactly who we are and to be free from harm in body, mind, and heart. That wherever we occupy a space, that we are safe in that space to be ourselves. Second is security. And security is to basically have all your needs met. And I don't mean just like a roof over your head and food on the plate. I mean anything that you really need in life to make your life feel good. So that's security. Trust in ourselves, which for us as feminine women is very specifically trusting our emotions and intuition, centering them, relying on them. And then trust in the world around us and those that are around us. And that will mean that we understand that the people in our lives, they act and behave in a way that always holds our highest good in mind. That's how we know they're trustworthy. And the last key is to be cherished by the masculine. So if we're alone, right, if we're in our own space, that would mean that our own masculine energy is in service of our feminine energy, that we center our intuition and emotions first. That's the core driver. That's how we move. That's what makes our decisions. And we employ our masculine decision-making, logic, reason, drive in service of that. In terms of relationships, whatever relationship it is, we want our masculine counterparts to cherish us, to honor and center our emotions and intuition as the most important information they could possibly have. They don't question it. They don't dismiss it. They don't write it off. They don't try to convince us otherwise. They don't gaslight us. They don't manipulate us. They say, baby, how are you feeling and how can I make that better? My favorite definition of cherishing is that the masculine never leaves the feminine alone in her pain until a solution is reached.
Okay. All right. So that last one is so interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think I could hear kind of echoes of the women's movement. You don't need a man. You don't need, you, you're fine on
Yeah,
your
good
own.
luck with that.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, and but the other part of this that I can really see is we're the ones in control of
Yeah.
creating these scenarios, the context of these 4 keys, so that we're the ones saying, y- y- "You're not cherishing me,"
Mm,
and that's not okay.
correct. Yeah, we determine what we need when it comes to safety. Like women might define safety differently. They might define what makes them feel secure differently. And so we can determine like the structure of how that looks. But we do need these things. And I think the challenge is, and this is a tricky challenge, I'm not going to lie. No, we don't need a man. But as human, we are relational beings. We just are. That's actually how our evolution has gotten us to where we are, is that it is through relationship with an intimate partner that our species has survived. Our
Mhm.
brains are hardwired for it. It's encoded in our DNA. It's built into your psyche. And the fact that we have a culture that emphasizes individuality, aloneness, isolation, it's another way that the patriarchy is in control. Because one of the first ways you control someone is to get them alone. And that's even more powerful when it's a feminine woman that you've got alone, because that is not her nature. The feminine needs connection. The feminine operates on empathy. The feminine wants to communicate, talk, collaborate, work things out. So, no, I mean, certainly there will be times in a woman's life that maybe, being single and alone for a while to work it out, totally great. But it doesn't last long. Even the staunchest women at some point turn around and go, gosh, I'd really like a snuggle buddy. It's just there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make you weak. It's part of being human. So one of the things that I want to just bring up and have women consider, right? Again, there was this bill of goods the patriarchy sold us. They didn't have us in mind. They position and center individuality and aloneness, but that's not who we are, and we are in fact relational beings. So while the four keys, we determine whether we feel safe in an environment, whether we feel secure in an environment, and to some extent we can provide those for ourselves, we can't do it all the time, and it is sure easier when we are in relation with other people. Relational living is so much more healthy and holistic, and it promotes greater well-being than this isolated individual kind of thinking, especially for the feminine woman.
And again, you also point out that this is about the feminine and the masculine. That
Mm.
is not always just men and women.
No.
Yeah, exactly. I think this idea that the feminine wants to be cherished is
Yeah.
so important and so something we're very disconnected from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember when I pitched this book to my agent, and I used the word cherish, and I could see, like, she bristled a little bit, and I asked her about that. I was like, what's with cherish? I don't want to be cherished. I want to be respected. And we unpacked it a little bit, and I said, well, that's the masculine. How do you want to feel in a relationship? And through talking, she actually was really moved by it. And she said, I've always thought of being cherished as being weak,
Yes. Yeah.
as being submissive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really. A lot of things about femininity have been positioned as weak, which makes even us as women try to repress or turn away from them. But to be cherished means to have so much ownership and agency and power in your intuitive knowing and your emotional depth that it's unshakable. And really, the only way that your relationships get by is if people pay attention to that. There's nothing weak about that. Saying, hey, look, I know you're on a path and I love that path for you, but it doesn't feel good to me. What do we do about it? And to really get them to attune to you and shift course that's a powerful move, and it benefits everyone. The person shifting course in response to that feels good because they've made you feel safe, or they've made you feel secure, or they've made you feel better. They've used their incredible intellect and rationale and reason and drive to support you, and then suddenly you feel better. And you feel loved and honored because you stood your emotional and intuitive ground. I mean, look, I can't say it strongly enough. There is nothing weak about femininity. There is nothing weak about femininity. Look at a woman whose family is threatened and tell me that she is weak. Look at a woman who has a sense that something's wrong and then goes out and fights for social change. I mean, the one that comes to mind really quickly is Erin Brockovich. Everyone told her, don't look here, everything's fine here. And what did she do? She changed the fate of an entire town.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the power of the feminine. The feminine are the inquisitors. We are the disruptors.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that the greatest expression of the feminine is wild and untamed. And you talk about
Yeah.
wildness and freedom and questioning the status quo,
Yeah.
and also the realm of the underworld. Those are also really interesting aspects of femininity.
Absolutely. I mean, they're mythological aspects of femininity to some extent too. That's how we bring to life the feminine in our myths and our stories, is with those kinds of ideas and images. And that's what the feminine, if we look, masculinity and femininity, they're psychological energies, right? I can't put them in a container or cut you open and show you the source of your femininity. Like, these are energies of the psyche. And in a bit of a nutshell, femininity is our unconscious, and masculinity is our conscious mind. Okay, so masculinity, again, that thought, that logic, that reason, that outward direction, that generosity, that providership, that protection, that's all very externalized energy. Femininity is the unconscious, which is the location of our dreams, our triggers, our emotions, our intuition. It's the creating something from nothing and you don't really know where it came from. Those are all the domain of the feminine. And the feminine is, Shakespeare famously wrote, the both the womb and the tomb. Or like my mom used to love to say, I brought you into this life, I can take you out. She, of course, was joking. Clearly, I'm still here. We worked out fine. But it's a fun kind of way to play on, like, women have this powerful energy within them. All women do. Life force energy. And whether we choose to have children or not, which again, this is the first time in history that women have the ability to exercise that choice. Mm-hmm. Whether we choose to have children or not, we are creatives. We are creators. We have the ability to create things from nothing that people have never thought of or seen or even imagined. It comes from us. That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and as you describe the unconscious and the mystery, and I can see that that's likely why the patriarchy has fears of the feminine. It's like that. Like
Yeah.
we don't know about that, but we know that's very powerful. But it seems untamed, and it seems like it could pop out at any time, and we have to put a lid on this thing because what could happen?
They can't figure it out.
Right.
They can't figure it out, right? There's no rationale or logic or reason. And for the distorted masculine, that's terrifying. The distorted masculine turns those great qualities of masculinity, which are leadership and guidance, into power over others and control. Okay, those are not real masculine qualities. Those are horrible patriarchal, keeping everybody under lock and key qualities. But yeah, when distorted masculinity can't figure something out, can't make sense of something, and can't control it, it's going to repress it. It's going to villainize it. It's going to write it off. It's going to want to try to put it under lock and key. And that's really where the feminine has been living for 3,000 to 8,000 years.
Yeah, well, now is our time.
Oh yeah, girl, sure is.
I like the term distorted masculine. I like that better than toxic masculinity. And I really feel like there's a lot of male bashing, a lot of man bashing going on. And I'm a person who loves men. I mean, I know that's a general statement, but even going into engineering, I mean, part of it was I love being around men. I understood them, and so I really appreciate that you're not coming at this from there's something bad or wrong about men and they're toxic and all that kind of stuff.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we need them. Frankly, we need them. And, they're, again, it's just improper training. It's sort of like if let's say you've got a 5-year-old who doesn't realize that that's a precious vase and he picks it up and accidentally breaks it. He actually didn't know better. Yes, he broke the vase, but he wasn't trained. He didn't have the information. And as soon as you let him know, hey, buddy, that was actually really important, and here's how we treat it in the future, now he's got the knowledge. And with his big heart, he's going to want to do better. So I want us all to just give each other some grace, because one of the things that's really powerful about the masculine is their big, big hearts. When they have their big, big hearts open, they are the protectors. They are the providers. They are the nurturers. They are the leaders, the guides. They are the ones who will help whatever vision we have creatively manifest and get done. So there's a beautiful counterpart happening here between masculinity and femininity, especially in its health. And it empowers us both, right? When those men with the big, big hearts get to provide what their beloved feminine needs, get to protect their beloved feminine in her favorite way, get to honor her by cherishing her intuition and her emotions, it jazzes and lights them up. And then it makes us feel good too. Like it truly is a win-win. And so we all just need to give each other some grace. We all had some improper training.
Mm-hmm.
We're all here existing in the patriarchy. And only really now are we starting to have these thoughts and ideas about how to do things differently. I mean, what's interesting to me, actually, Carol, is that in my research for writing this book, I can't tell you how many books like this I found for men. Amazing books for men. They're doing the work. They're doing the work. In fact, the title was inspired by one of the foundational books for men's works these days by a guy named David Data called The Way of the Superior Man. And I read that book, 20 years ago. And I thought, well, I need to write the juxtaposition for that, but we don't need to be superior women. That's not what we want. And that's how I came by the title, The Way of the Satisfied Woman. But men, there are amazing men's group. I've been on a few podcasts with some of those men who are doing the work, and they're getting it. They're getting it. They're interested. They want to crawl out of that distortion of the patriarchy. What's interesting is I didn't really find anything like this for women.
Yeah.
Women haven't yet really keyed into, hang on a second, there's something different for me too. And also femininity has been distorted. How do
Yes.
we fix this? How do we take ownership of who we are? So I'm excited to bring this work to people.
It's really important. I love this. I love your message. I love your work. And I also think
Thanks.
about just if women could correct the distortion within them, and men are wanting to correct the distortion within them, I mean, what a powerful world we would have. And also though, what a responsibility it is for those who choose to have children to
Yes.
to shift this paradigm so
Yeah,
that we can clear out this distortion and
absolutely.
raise our boys to become these generous, big-hearted nurturers and
Yep.
protectors,
Yep.
and raise our girls to
Be
want to be
creative,
creative and
abundant life forces
right,
who are
life forces that
wild and
honor the
free.
intuition and
Yeah.
kind of make sure that the people in their life, the
Yep.
males in their life are cherishing them and creating
Hmm.
that space for themselves. I mean, I really see this
Absolutely.
as huge in our evolution.
It's enormous and it has an incredible impact as well. One of the things, just to mention quickly about that idea and concept, that I think I if I could leave listeners who have children with one thing to think about and consider, one of the most important and critical things we can show our children past the age of about 10 or 11, and this is all due to brain development and psychological development. All children under 10 are in the feminine. All of them. They all want to receive. They're all in that inquisitive, like, what's going on with the world? Why are you doing this? How does that work? Phase. They all need to be protected. They all need to be provided for. They all need to be guided. Okay, so all children are in the feminine. So one of the agreements that we make, even as feminine women or people who raise kids, is that until they're about 10, we're all in the masculine for them. So for about 10 years, a feminine woman is going to have to shift into her masculine, which is going to be disorienting, but it's for the benefit of raising those kids who are in the feminine. But as soon as that kid turns 10 or 11, you have to shift back into the feminine. Because psychologically and developmentally, what they are going to need to see is the juxtaposition of these two incredible dynamic forces working together in order to understand how it works inside their own life, mind, body, heart. So, I see a lot of women and I work with a lot of women who they get into that masculine parenting role when the kids are small and they kind of never get out of it. But they're going to need to see your incredible shining feminine in order to know what that looks like. And for the young girls, in order to understand what that means for them, that they don't have to give themselves away, that they need to find a counterpart who cherishes them deeply. And for the young boys, is going to need to see, oh, this is how we treat women. This is how we honor and cherish women. That's really the critical piece.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, we've got a lot of work to do, I think.
I know. That's why I had to write a whole book about it.
Yeah, well, you're gonna have to go on the circuit. You probably already are teaching everybody. You're gonna have to start training trainers to be out there and
Girl, I am doing my best.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. Okay, so we probably have about 10 or 12 minutes. I was thinking about possibly going into the those 4 stages that where you talked about culturally there's the stages of the maiden, the lover, the mother, and the crone. And you've
Yeah.
kind of shifted that into, I think, more empowering stages: inception,
Yes.
sensation, initiation, and
Yeah.
satisfaction. Is that something you'd want to go into, or do you have something else that you'd like rather talk about?
Whatever you like, really.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about that because I think that, like, I think the stage of the crone is really hard for women to accept.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing to say about those I won't even call them original or traditional labels is they come from a male psychologist,
Yes, they
right? And
do.
they are all still in service to men or in relationship to men. Like the maiden is interesting to men for her eventual possible fecundity.
Mhm.
And the crone is named, it's like that's when you think of a crone, you think of like an old ugly witch who has no use to
Exactly.
society except to just terrorize people. So, traditionally and incorrectly so, women past menopause have kind of been discarded and really not valued at all. Like it wasn't until recently in our media or our movies or our TV that we even see or center these vibrant and vital women who are postmenopausal. And one of the things that to me is just mind blowing, I mean, like you said, there's so much work to do and it's so complex, and the patriarchy has just given us such short shrift. But, I mentioned at the beginning my grandmother and how critically important she was in my life. We as humans are one of only 3 species on the planet that live past menopause, that the females live past menopause, that we have menopause and then they continue to exist. One of 3 species on the planet. The other 2 are killer whales and pilot whales. And the role of the grandmother in those species and in ours is literally to create and raise good children. We do not any longer have the pressure of childbearing. We can't. It's taken away, it's gone. And now the only pressure we have is to ensure the incredible growth and life and spirit of the young people in our lives. The point of menopause is grandmotherhood. And for those of us that don't have children, it's mentorship. It's helping young women grow into this incredible, wise phase that is actually critical in terms of our human evolution. So, men don't have this. Men don't get that, right? We do. We have the power of mentorship and leadership. That's ours. That's our wisdom. And I like to think, actually, of our intuition as the voice of our foremothers coming through history to us so that we can listen and so that we can learn. Because I absolutely guarantee that as hard as life is for women on the planet right now, it was harder 20 years ago.
Mhm.
It was even harder 50 years ago, and it was absolutely impossible 100 and more years ago. So they've all been through so much worse than whatever it is that we've got going on, I promise you. Now, I had the incredible fortune of having a good relationship with my grandmother where she shared those stories with me and taught me those things. But if we didn't have that, we have our intuition. And if we don't have our grandmothers right now, we have women around us who hold this post, this precious post that only they get to hold. And I think we need to really revere them and center them in that way.
Yeah, I think you raise an important point. If you're not a grandmother, that doesn't mean you can't
Yeah.
be a grandmother. You don't have to be a
Yeah.
biological grandmother.
Yeah.
Uh,
And if you don't like the term grandmother, that's fine too. I like the term mentor,
yeah,
or
yeah,
wise woman, like
yeah,
call it
yeah.
whatever you want. But there has long been culturally this notion that as soon as you hit menopause, you're no longer attractive. You're no longer desirable. You're no longer of worth. Oh, it's time to just sort of crawl into a hole and die. And I want to really erase that because we are living longer as a species with the advancements in health and science and medicine and everything. We've got a lot of time after menopause to do something incredible with our lives. And we no longer have any expectation or pressure around family. Either at that point, our family is raised and grown and we're good. They've survived. We've gotten that job done. Or we just can't have children anymore. And so there's something else for us. Again, men don't have this. Men can start a family at any age. They can start a career at any age.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of have just this sort of wishy-washy timetable of doing whatever they want when they want. And we've been sold that narrative, but it doesn't work for our bodies. As feminine women born in a female body, we don't have any of those luxuries. There will be a clock that starts at the moment of menstruation, and then that clock ends at the moment of menopause. And somewhere in between, we have this limited time frame with this critical choice, family or not. And we don't have the luxury of putting it off. We just don't. So if family is important to us, there is this time that we get to do that. And if career is important to us, I would actually really like to see women have the agency and power and respect and recognition to be able to start thriving careers at menopause. Why not?
Yeah, I get that. I certainly started my second career then. And
Nice.
I think it's when I think about it, it's really was a very creative decade. I mean, I think it's a very creative decade, and I think it's a choice we make. And I think that also we are also I don't know if it's the patriarchy or we're doing it to
Yeah.
ourselves, but the beauty standards, it's very difficult to age and to become that crone or grandmother, and we're
Yeah.
trying to kind of fight all that.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot we need to learn to embrace that and embrace this very, very creative period. If you've
Yeah.
spent the prior decade or two raising kids, there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, that's a different creativity. It's a different kind of creativity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's exciting. And I think it's really cool that we get these very distinct stages of life and that we can lean into what those stages represent and the energies of them. I would like for us to take time to really um, live them because they come with such different attitudes and energies. I mean, the other thing about being born in a female body are the hormones. It's one of the reasons why we have such an emotional depth as women, and this is just biological. Like, good luck trying to rationalize your way out of it. Your hormones are real and they do have an effect, and they are going to have a different effect before when you're in early childhood, kind of young girl. They are going to have a much different effect as an early young woman before the age of 25. They're going to have a different effect if you get pregnant. They're going to have a different effect every month, every 28 days as you're menstruating. And then they're going to have a profoundly different, your whole brain changes at menopause. So we're going to have all these different sort of iterations and abilities in our life that are going to mean that we have different expressions of ourselves. And frankly, that is so feminine. That is so creative. That is so wild. That is so free. And one of the things that I think, again, just for consideration and a challenge is as part of living life by men's rules under the patriarchy and this idea that we have to do it all, be it all, have it all at all times, better than everybody else, is that I see this so often right now that young women are told, you've got to start your career. You've got to start your career right now. Right now, you got to start your career. And so many women go into that career drive with all of that creative energy, and they build these incredible careers, and then they turn around at age 38, 40, 42, and go, oh my God, I have a great career, but I don't have a family. And now their own body is going to opt them out of that choice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because society said career first, family later. As a female in this body, we do not have that luxury. So I want us to really question, because there's no right choice here, right? No problem if you're a career girl and you go for it. That was me. Loved it. No problem if you're like, nope, I'm a family girl. This is my time to do this. This is what I'm going to do, which is why I would love to start a movement of ladies' careers at menopause. Because that's when you have the most wisdom, the most to impart. You've got energy. You don't have the responsibility of family anymore. Go for it.
I
Just
think
a
you're
thought, just
absolutely
to
right.
consider.
Yeah, I think about that. Post menopause, I became a minister, and now I'm a podcast
Oh,
host.
I love that. See?
Completely
So many
different.
things are possible.
Yeah, so many things are possible. Okay, Alanna, this has been so much fun. I do want to give you the last word. We talked about a lot of fun stuff, but
We
whatever
sure
else
did.
you want to share, I'm going to give you the last word.
I think that I just want to leave women with, like, everything is awesomely okay. Everything that you want to choose and do in life is awesomely okay. And what I would encourage is that you do it in a feminine way. Do it in your own way, because you can do anything, but to do it from the position of the feminine is your greatest position of strength. And nothing is stronger than you moving and acting from your intuition, so listen to it.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. I just
It's a
think this
pleasure.
is such important work. It's spiritual work. It's
I
really
think
becoming ourselves. I think to me the spiritual path is becoming ourselves. It's like shedding all the layers, all the conditioning, all the stuff that we think we are, and everything that we
agreed.
think reality is, and stepping into our true divine nature, and that is the
Yeah,
authentic feminine, the authentic masculine. This work is so important, and
it
I
is.
really
Yeah.
have this vision for what the world could be like or will be like when we release all the distortions and step into the
Ugh.
powerful. Yeah.
Girl, I hope I'm here to see it.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. I do too. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alanna. Thank you everyone for joining. I know you're blessed by this wonderful dialogue, and we'll have links to Alanna's book and anything else she's doing. And I just really, really appreciate this message of inspiration. So,
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
yeah. Okay, great. And also, you have a great podcast. We'll have links to that as well. All right, everybody. I now close the Spiritual Forum.